Andy, my dude, have you heard of the magical website builder known as Squarespace?
Ugh, not another Squarespace ad. I feel like every podcast is sponsored by them.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it. Yes, okay, it is overhyped, but actually it lives up to the hype. Squarespace is like a website fairy godmother. With a click of a button, your site transforms into a beautiful masterpiece.
A website fairy godmother? That sounds interesting. What makes it so magical?
Well, for starters, those slick templates make anyone look like a professional web designer. Pick one, customize the colors and fonts to match your brand, and voila. Plus, the drag-and-drop Fluid engine is so easy, your grandma could build a site on Squarespace.
Well, she did knit me a lovely scarf last Christmas. Maybe website design is next.
Exactly. And when you're ready to sell your Nana's handmade scarves online, Squarespace has built-in e-commerce. Add a store with one click. Get flexible payment options. Then watch those sales roll in. And when she wants to teach others her steezy scarf skills, Squarespace's new courses feature is just the ticket. Nana can set up her curriculum and enrollments and payments in a snap and become the next e-knitting influencer.
Oh, wow, you really sold me with the grandma angle. Sign me up for that free trial.
Just go to thenextreel.com/Squarespace and transform your site into a beautiful Squarespace masterpiece.
Well, thanks, Pete. Even though it's overhyped, Squarespace actually sounds perfect for Nana's site's needs. Appreciate the warning on the ads, though. I'll brace myself next time I listen to a podcast.
Anytime. Let me know if you need any help getting that site up and running.
It's hard to believe that we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
So many great conversations over the years about so many great movies. All that said, producing this show week after week requires a ton of work behind the scenes.
Becoming a Next Reel member gives you access to all sorts of additional and exclusive content. Plus, you're helping us keep the lights on. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership, where you can learn more about becoming a member, which costs a measly $5 a month, practically the same as one fancy coffee drink. And you get so much more.
Every month, we record a bonus episode exclusively for members. Those episodes cover movies from whatever series we're covering at the moment, or add to previous series.
Some movies we've covered that only members get to hear us discuss include The Blues Brothers,
The Russia House,
Naked Lunch,
Independence Day,
The Hot Rock,
and Relic, the better one. Plus, members get to vote on what we're going to discuss for those episodes.
We also record additional pre- and post-show content in regular episodes that only members get to hear.
Like conversations about similarly themed movies.
And answering listener questions from our live member chat.
Speaking of our live member chat, we record almost all of our episodes in Discord, where members can chat right along with us live.
Members get access to other members-only channels in our Discord community as well. On top of all that, members get all episodes a full week earlier than everyone else in a private Next Reel feed just for them that includes all the shows in the Next Reel family. The Next Reel, the Film Board,
movies we like, Sitting in the Dark, and more new projects on the way.
To top it all off, members don't have to listen to ads. We've already eliminated those annoying, dynamically inserted ads that, let's face it, we all hated.
We are listening to you.
We love podcasting for a living, and those ads help to pay the bills. Now, we're counting on you, dear listener.
We promise. We aren't going back to those terrible, dynamically inserted ads that don't relate to us at all. All we ask is that you consider supporting the Next Reel family of podcasts with a membership.
Again, it's $5 per month or $55 per year. Just head to thenextreel.com/membership.
thenextreel.com/membership. Get your access to early, ad-free episodes with bonus content, member bonus episodes, and access to member channels and live streams in Discord by signing up today. I'm Pete Wright.
And I'm Andy Nelson.
Welcome to the Next Reel. When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
A Place in the Sun is over. Mama, I am convicted.
This is the unforgettable story of a boy from nowhere, fighting desperately for his place in the sun, torn between the conflicting passions that shaped his destiny. Montgomery Clift, dazzled by the radiant beauty of Elizabeth Taylor, a girl so far above him she seemed like a goddess, but only too human when he held her in his arms.
We'll think of something somehow, whatever way we can. We'll have such wonderful times together, just the two of us.
Montgomery Clift, bound by the warm and vital appeal of Shelley Winters, the girl who clung to him with an overwhelming hunger for love.
I've been wanting to do that for such a long time.
So did I.
Will we see each other again like this?
It's up to you. You gotta be careful.
One love grew in the shadows of the night, sealed by a secret they could share with no one. The other love flamed in the bright light of gaiety and laughter, a need that drove him with all the recklessness of youth itself, a dream that was built on deception.
You lied to me, George, for the last time. Now I want you to come and get me.
Yes, I'll come down in the morning.
And if you're not here in half an hour, I'll come where you are. I'll tell them everything, George. I mean it.
You too will know the fears, the desperation that claimed him, as fate weaves the strange fabric of his life. For A Place in the Sun is a story that will forever hold a place among your greatest dramatic memories.
Is your name George Eastman?
Yes.
You're under arrest.
A Place in the Sun, Andy, is what we're talking about. And yeah, this is a darker movie than I expected it to be.
This was one that I had no idea what the movie was. I knew it was Montgomery Clift, Elizabeth Taylor, Shelley Winters, with George Stevens directing, but I had no clue what this was. In fact, I think in my head, I think that I was thinking this was a totally different movie.
Yes.
And so when I sat down to watch this, I'm like, this is not at all where I thought this story was going. And it is, of course, here because this is the next in our series. We're doing the 1952 Academy Awards, the Best Cinematography Black and White nominees. This is third on our list of 5. So that's why we're here.
That's why we're here. I'm not entirely sure what I expected was something more along the lines of just something much more epic, I think, based on the book, which I hadn't read, this sort of classic literature thing. I don't know if I expected it to be more Scarlett O'Hara, less Hitchcock, throw him off a boat plan. But what we got was a movie that I was really genuinely invested in. It's a lot of movie. There's a lot of movie in this little movie, but I found myself really intrigued. Really intrigued. How did it hit you?
Yeah, I agree completely. This, again, walking into this not really knowing anything about it other than, I'd kind of watched the trailer, so I had a little bit of sense as to the sort of drama. I thought it was just going to be kind of this 3-way drama between a guy who is from the wrong side of the tracks who falls for a rich girl, and that's the girl from the wrong side of the tracks who he had been with kind of comes after him. But I didn't realize it was going to go the direction it did, and I didn't realize that we were going to really kind of spend the last act in a courtroom. So a lot of interesting shifts going on in this I found this to just be an exciting film to discover. And I think a lot of it is the actors. I mean, Montgomery Clift, I've always found just a mesmerizing actor. Just the way that he internalizes so much of his performance, and you can just feel so much going on with his character and read so much into him. And he certainly very much was one of the first people that was really kind of adapting that whole method acting concept. And I felt like there was so much going on with him that he was mesmerizing. And then just the interesting dynamic between the two women and the world that he was in with the family of the Eastmans that he was loosely a part of. And then everything going on with Alice and kind of the workers in the poorer world that he came from. It created a beautiful kind of dichotomy of worlds and this story of this man who is split between the two of them. And really interesting. And, I had no idea. I'd never heard of the book by Theodore Dreiser called An American Tragedy. I tried, after I learned it was made as a film in the 30s, I tried to see if the 1931 adaptation, which was called An American Tragedy, I tried to see if it was in fact available, but I couldn't find it anywhere. I don't know if that's something that I'd have to rent from like Scarecrow Video or something. But that was a Joseph von Sternberg film. But as it stands, I really had a great time with this one.
I think we should talk about Montgomery Clift because he's carrying a lot of weight in this movie. And you bring up his performance just in terms of adopting the method sort of style. That's one of the things that makes this movie play for me. The fact that, we open with him on a country road hitchhiking. Like, I had no question who this guy was as he transformed from the sort of, hitchhiking ne'er-do-well to the, the shunned nephew role, his first time in the house, to, the T-shirted factory worker as he's working on the conveyor belt in the room full of all the other women who are folding scarves, including the romances, right? The romance that he has with Shelley Winters and then with Elizabeth Taylor. He was a complete chameleon in this movie. And I think that's one of the things to really celebrate about his performance. It is an ambitious performance of a morally weak character that I think just stands out as someone who is complex and believable and primary to the performances of Elizabeth Taylor and Shelley Winters, which are also fantastic. I was riveted by this guy. I didn't know what to expect. And you talk about like that screen charisma. I thought he was an interesting guy to watch.
Especially like early on, it was just, and I think really pairing with the cinematography. I mean, I'm looking forward to that conversation because the cinematography was really interesting throughout this film. But like the way that we kind of shift in the story, like right at the very beginning, as he calls his uncle and then he's coming over that first time, and the way the shots are constructed where, you've got the friends of his cousins coming over to hang out, including Elizabeth Taylor. Nobody notices him. He's like this little invisible being that is just there, completely not seen by them. It was fascinating. Like they would position him in shots where he's kind of in the distance watching all of this. You could tell he wants to kind of be a part of this, but can't figure out how to be accepted. He doesn't feel like he's part of that world. They're not even noticing him. It was just such a fascinating way to kind of portray him. And then you could see it in his face as he's trying to figure it out over the course of the story and how to be part of these things and how he's so uncomfortable. But it was very carefully constructed by Stevens. And I don't know, I was really taken by Clift through all of those sequences. And he is a performer who does a great job of playing when he's not talking. And there are so many moments for him when he's not talking and you're seeing everything through his eyes and you're getting so much out of him. Or another great example, there's a fantastic oneer that is, I think, 2.5 minutes or so of him when he's back at his place, and there's 2 phone calls. One comes from Alice, and then the next one comes from Angela. And just his body language, the way he's so kind of quiet and barely audible when he's talking to Alice. This is when she's first telling him that she's pregnant. And then he's kind of devastated. And then instantly Angela calls right away and it totally shift all in one take. And he is an actor who can really deliver when directed that way. And just, it was powerful.
Right. And that scene, and you mentioned the cinematography, we should talk about the editing too, because I think the cross-cutting in a lot of these scenes to establish a connection between these 3 characters when they're not in the same place, it's done often in phone calls. It's done at the dinner scene where he's waiting, or where she is waiting for him and she gets on a train and decides to head up and see him. And those, like the intensity of the 3-way conversations that don't actually happen, that are implied by editing and camera, I think are really, really strong. It's so cool. It's so cool the way they pull that together.
Paired with Shelley Winters, who, we've talked about a few times And it's generally been later in her career when she's having a lot more fun in her roles in things like the Poseidon Adventure and
right.
Octopus. But then also, she was in closer to this time, something like Night of the Hunter. So I think that there's a lot of power that she brings to the performance and is perfect to play opposite him in this film, especially. The draw between them is very quick. Like it happens over, I don't know, of course, I don't know how long he was at the factory before they really started dating, but like a couple weeks
6
or
or 8
so.
hours.
Who knows? Very, very quick. Long enough for him to get into his t-shirt, right? But he bumps into her at the movie theater, and next thing he knows, or they know, like they're walking down the street holding hands, like they already had a draw to each other. And so the idea of kind of like coming together was pretty easy and natural for the two of them. But from there, he is like a player. He's very fast moving and he gets her into bed very quickly. But just the way that Shelley Winters plays all of that, like you can tell that she's wanting to be in this relationship with him. She wants to, like, she's very accepting of him and very happy with him. And it seems like something that could have been fine had it not been this draw that he always had to Angela Vickers, played by Elizabeth Taylor. It's just that he always thought she was of a different world and would never accept him. And it was only because of that moment where she started talking to him when he was playing pool by himself that suddenly things shifted. And then from that point, watching Shelley Winters' face every time they're interacting, like you can tell she's in this battle with herself, trying to not be the jealous girl, but trying to still be positive and excited. And then the whole pregnancy thing happens and everything shifts again. Very strong performance by Shelley Winters.
It really is, because the three-way relationship between these two, like he's in the middle and he is reaching for Angela, right? He's striving to be good enough to be with Angela, but he's already sort of settled, and I say that in quotes, settled for Alice. And I think that's what Shelley Winters does so well, is she plays that role of the settled girlfriend, and gives us the perspective of what it's like to be the settled girlfriend so beautifully. Like how badly she doesn't want to be the crazy one. Like she doesn't want to be the one to get on the train. She wants to trust, and he's given her no reason to trust. And that's part of the complexity of his performance, that around every turn, he has an opportunity to make the sort of morally right decision, to stay with her, to do the right thing by her. And all he can come up with is throw her off a boat. Like the dude is not someone to aspire to, right? He's just in that respect, it sort of resolves into this portrayal of the American dream in which names matter more than intention and action, right? It's not a great portrayal. When you talk about the title of the book, An American Tragedy, right? That's an intentional play on, even back in this period, we were dealing with the issues of sort of the 1% and what they can have, even when you put a nice elderly face on it, in the form of Senior Eastman. Man, it is just fantastic and layered.
Well, and it really also is speaking to the American dream, right? And this is something that I think that George Eastman, Montgomery Clift's character, had been striving for all of his life, is breaking out of the poverty, he came from, as over the course of the story, we're kind of getting hints as to his family and kind of this religious family that he came from. Like his family's running like a mission shelter, but they're also like street side singers and everything. And it sounds like the system caught on to him, or them doing this, and that he wasn't in school. And so the system required him to go into school, but then he left it early. And so he never really had the education. But it's clear, like he kind of always wanted more. And so to the point where, as we learn over the course of the story, he ran into his uncle just completely by happenstance. And his uncle is just like, hey, yeah, if you're ever in town, hit me up and we'll see if we can help you out. And he instantly quits his job and comes out here. Like, this is a person who's striving for something more. He clearly wants more and is trying to do everything he can to get it. And I think he probably would have been able to move right into that perfect American dream had it not been for this relationship that he so quickly got into with Alice. If he had followed the rules and just not got involved with any coworkers, that never would have happened. And he would have had this life living the high life because he kept kind of moving up the ranks at the factory. It seemed like Angela's family, they'd kind of bought into this guy and were all aboard to welcome him as a part of the family and her new husband and all this. And it was only by these other decisions that he made that really kind of brought him down. And so it's an interesting look at the American dream and somebody who's so keen on getting there, but also is, their own downfall.
Well, and I think I think that's a really important note that he, from the opening shot, that long shot behind his head, he is effectively worshiping at the billboard of Eastman. There is no question he quit his other job intentionally in order to go get his way, work his way into this big company with using trading on his name. And that's kind of the magic of Clift's performance too, right? Which is to say, oh, he can be this sort of clumsy guy, but the truth is he's taking the easy way. Even working in the factory, there is no question in my mind that he is intentionally trying to work up into this family's business. It just, I don't think the guy quits his other job, on accident, if not for having this easy opportunity with his uncle available to him.
Yeah, right. Well, that's what I'm saying. He's looking at every opportunity to advance himself.
Yeah.
Even, he starts at an entry-level job, basically sorting boxes, and is already writing detailed outlines to his uncle. Not that his uncle ever gets them, but he's writing detailed outlines about, this is how I think we can speed up the process. I think we can increase 20 to 25% if we make these changes. He is somebody who's already thinking about these things. And so looking for chances to improve himself, whether by his own ingenuity or by the fact that his family is in. He'll take any chance he gets to get there.
Yeah. And look at that exchange with his uncle when he says, I wrote this report. His uncle doesn't even, he doesn't acknowledge that it was ever received, but it doesn't matter. The fact that he wrote the thing is all it took for his uncle to say, come on out to the house, right? That's all it took, because his uncle is just as guilty of this sort of nepotism in business as he's trying to achieve himself.
And I think it also speaks to the fact that there is this element of beauty that is also tied into this world. I think the fact that Montgomery Clift is a very handsome man, even though he's in this lower rank, if it was a less handsome man playing this character, I think that uncle would have a harder time welcoming him to those higher echelons within the company, but he looks the part. He acts the part enough that he can get by. And you look at everything else in that world. You've got Elizabeth Taylor. You've got already all of these handsome, beautiful, attractive people in that world. And I think Shelley Winters, as beautiful as she is, she noted that she was a little frustrated that Stevens was working so hard to make her look more mousy and unattractive in this film, even though it kind of fits the part. But she said it ended up leading to a lot more of that type of role, and she felt like she ended up getting pigeonholed in kind of these mousier roles, and she was a little frustrated with that. But at the same time, she worked so well in that. But it's that line that they're dancing. And it speaks to the fact that the Eastman Company sells swimsuits. All the billboards are beautiful women laying on the beach, smiling out at you. And I think it all ties in so perfectly to this rift between these two worlds. And just by, his own, it's hard to say, nepotism, a little bit of skill, a little bit of luck. The fact that is a fairly honest character, I think in some aspects, I think all of those things kind of help him get to that place.
Yeah, you point out the swimsuits. I think that's a great point, but also his admiration of male fashion too, right? He's always trying to like up his game. We see him ogling suits in stores. He wears them. He shows up at different places. Like he's reaching. He's trying to do what he can to fit in. And I think that's another one of those statements of the film is that like everybody's reaching to fit in. And it's a little bit more subtle. I don't know, maybe because it's more dated. I think if the movie were remade right now, it would be a little bit more ham-fisted than how it slams home the dangers of capitalism and nepo babies. But man, it's all here.
Yeah.
Isn't it a little funny that all the stuff that he does in business to work up, you never really get a sense that he fails in business, right? The stuff that brings him down are the decisions that he makes with his interpersonal relationships, and we never get a sense of was he actually really good at business. This is not a Working Girl kind of a story, right? Where he shows up and nobody expects him to succeed, and it turns out he's really talented. He might be, but the movie doesn't ever give us that sense. All the movie says is all you have to know is his name. That's all you need to know.
Exactly. We never see that uncle finally reading that outline for increasing production, implementing it, and finding out that wow, and actually not only 20 to 25%, it's 50% better. Like we never get that.
And he organized a leveraged buyout of the Kodak Corporation, right? Like who knows, right? What it is. That's all I could think about was Eastman Kodak.
Right.
Like we never get that sense, and I think that's an important note for me is that the movie isn't necessarily as much as it's sort of about the American dream. It's kind of American dream adjacent because he makes it not by the sweat of on his back. Like we only get a little bit of sweat on his back in the t-shirt, and then he's wearing nice sunglasses and a nice Bahama shirt.
Right. Yeah, I think that it is a really interesting portrayal of just like this character trying to advance at every opportunity that he could, and it is so interesting that he was so fast in that relationship with Alice. I mean, not only is it like that first chance meeting at the movie theater that, instantly starts their relationship, but like the way that first time that they have sex back at her apartment, the way that happens, it feels like so unexpected, and it feels like he's kind of pushing her into it. And I mean, again, they kind of acknowledge that these two really want to be together. It never felt rapey. It never felt like, he was pushing her without her desires, but it certainly felt like it was going a little faster than she was maybe wanting. But the way that they kind of portrayed that, it was so interesting in the way that Stevens kind of shot that whole thing, because again, it's a very dark room. Like this film is a very dark film, and it's a single shot that just slowly kind of pushes in past them as they start, kissing and everything. And then we just kind of push in on the radio until suddenly it kind of dissolves. We hear a rooster crow and we see him leaving. And it's just like the way that the film was constructed was it gave us like his motivations and his journey, like being so fast with some of this in incredible ways.
Yeah, right. That's also part of his story. As much as he's aggressively moving up the ranks at Eastman and doing so in the most subtle way, he's aggressively moving forward in every single aspect of his life, right? And that's what drives him to push those relationships with Alice and Vickers. That's what drives him to keep moving forward in those relationships at the expense of what he's left behind, right? The trail of destruction. That's the other piece of this movie is it's a trail of destruction movie, and he has to reckon with that at the end. And that's the part I didn't see coming. If we jump just to the end of the film and his arc in particular, the end of the film, the end title credit comes up and he is dead man walking, right? Like that's the end. He's convicted and of murdering Alice. And I think the way they got there, the way they wrote themselves into that sort of implied confession when I guess it was the priest was talking to him in the cell and asked him, what was in your heart, right? If you were thinking about this other woman when you were making the choice of whether or not you should fight to save Alice, then murder was in your heart. You're a murderer. And the look of recognition on George's face when he's realizing this, I thought was incredible. Like, this is a Just Desserts movie. And I think the commentary part of the film, had it been made later, he probably would have gotten off, because that's the commentary we make. That's the thing that makes us more sick right now about the 1%, is that names matter enough to get you out of murder. I couldn't help but reflect on that as I'm watching this movie, that I'm relieved that it ended the way it did, and in equal parts surprised that just because of culture. Did that hit you funny at all?
No, I completely agree. It was so interesting in the way that it was constructed, because there is kind of this expectation, and I think it plays on us as an audience also, like, where do we stand with this guy? I mean, we're watching him. We're there. We're the only really people there in the water with him when all of this happens. We see what happens. We see that he didn't make the decision to hit her over the head with an oar and throw her into the water. We actually see that he's frustrated. He goes to the front of the boat, lays down, and she stands and starts walking, and the boat topples over, throwing them into the water. We do cut from there, though, to the point where he's kind of making his way to shore, so we don't get to see that critical moment of him not answering her calls or answering them too late. And so we're kind of going off of the conversation, but we're kind of there with his uncle and everyone else as they're talking, because his uncle has that conversation with his team saying, what, if everything that he said is true, then we're going to spend everything we have to help him out. But if we think that he actually did it, then he's not getting a cent. And the story that George tells the lawyers, they walk out saying, I don't know, I completely believe him. He is so forthright in the way that he talks and describes things that all of that is true. Like, he gets himself to a point where he's believing it. And it really isn't until that final moment when that priest comes in and is talking with him, he finally has that moment of realization. Sure, he didn't actually go through with the murder, but it was in his heart. He was thinking about Angela, and he probably could have gotten around and saved her. And we kind of get that through Raymond Burr as the DA kind of, attacking him and everything in court. But it really is that final moment where he realizes, oh my gosh, yeah, I guess I am responsible for this. And as an audience, we're like, wow, yeah, you are. And I loved, there's fantastic shots of Clift in court when he's up on the stand, the witness stand, and you have the whole jury behind him. And it's kind of it's not like a really long lens, but it's long enough where it is just kind of compressed. It feels like they're sitting right next to him, just listening to everything he says. And it was so interesting looking at their faces, because it was an exercise in storytelling, looking at the faces. I think I'm believing that person. Oh, maybe I'm not believing that person. Oh, no, I think I am. No, maybe I'm not. You could never exactly tell which side they were on. It played perfectly.
Where were you in that wavering back and forth? Were you on team convict the whole time?
I wasn't, because I didn't see him kill her, and I didn't see, they very purposefully don't show that bit in the water where really everything comes down to it. And the way that the lawyers were spinning it were he may have had murder in his heart, but he didn't go through with it. I'm like, well, it's hard to convict then. But when the DA kind of spells it all out, you were only that far from her. He's doing all of his stuff with the boat. You could have swum around. You had plenty of time to get there and to help her. But why did it take you so long to swim that distance? And it does start kind of raising those questions. And I think that was the point in the film, he probably could have done it. And I was starting to shift too. You can see why later producers would recognize in Raymond Burr a performance that would lead him to Perry Mason, because it's he was so perfect as that role, and terrifying. Holy cow, when the DA, when he takes that oar, smashes down into the boat. Wow, is that allowed in court?
The thing that frustrated me a little bit is that, because I'm with you, that, I was swinging both ways too. The fact that they convicted him with first-degree murder was a little bit puzzling to me, because that's the prosecutor one. The prosecutor said, you fully intended to kill her, and you swung the oar, kind of a thing. You tipped the boat. You did that. And I think what we see in the stuff that the audience sees as we're in the boat with them is not that. What we see is a guy who is at the last minute deeply conflicted, right? We don't know what he's going to do, but we know he stood to step away from her to the back of the boat. We know he was conflicted. And the fact that the boat tipped over and that he didn't save her is second degree, right? Like, he knows that his behavior is something that resulted in her death because he didn't swim around the boat to get her, and probably wouldn't have led to the death penalty. So I think some of those were a bit of like narrative hoops that they jumped through to get us there, to that title card, which was super dramatic. And I like the way we got there, especially because the point of the story is what's in his heart. What's in his heart doesn't necessarily imply only the stuff that we see in the jail cell or about the trial. But what's been in his heart from the very opening shot has been aspiration, climb the ladder, and now he's having to, reap those results.
Well, and that is, I wasn't sure like where that landed as far as like the legal system at the time. Like, would that have been manslaughter? Like, where should that have landed? And I can't help but think some of that really boils down to the real case that this was based on. This was based on the book An American Tragedy by Theodore Dreiser, who based that on the actual murder of Grace May Brown in 1906. And she was murdered by her boyfriend, Chester Gillette, on Big Moose Lake in New York after she told him she was pregnant. In that particular case, it seemed like he did actually hit her over the head with a tennis racket and drown her. And they said it was a premeditated murder. He was sentenced to death. He was killed in the electric chair. And so I can't help but think that they were, to a certain extent, still trying to, stay close to that actual case, which, I'm assuming Dreiser also did in his book.
Well, I think that's really interesting. I think that's a funny sort of artifact of of adapting the book that maybe on screen, and certainly it's a touch dated since we don't know the law as well as, we don't know the law at all. What are we talking about? Well, okay, so we've been talking about Montgomery Clift for a long, long time. Let's talk about Elizabeth Taylor. We haven't mentioned really her much at all.
Elizabeth Taylor, 17 at the time, she made this, and this was, we talked about in our member pre-show chat a little bit about child actors and their performances where they kind of advance to more mature roles. She always saw this as kind of her first step into being in more serious fare. Yeah, I mean, she's only 17, but there's definitely a lot going on here. And I think, she's acknowledged, she ended up having a very strong friendship with Montgomery Clift after this that kind of lasted through their life. His story is tragic, after his car accident that kind of left his face messed up, and he didn't end up really doing much more after that, and ended up with a drinking problem and dying early. Just kind of really sad and tragic life. But she was always there. I think they were in 3 films together. She was always there by his side through everything. But I think that there is this sense of this teenager, the 17-year-old girl. She's still in school, but I found her performance just to be really energetic, very, very strong. It's easy to see why he's drawn in so much, because I was drawn in right away. Like, she's just mesmerizing to see on screen. I think it helps that Edith Head's costumes work so well on her, and she's just gorgeous. It was perfect. And like their kiss that they have in this film it was so electric. And I mean, I think I saw it on some list of like, hot kisses in film or something like that. It was a very exciting moment to see. They worked so well together. And it was interesting because the kiss that they have is also like shot behind them and it's behind his shoulder. And so it's kind of obscured by him for a large chunk of it. But it's still, there is something about it still that even shooting it that way made it even more interesting because, you know, it's that much more hidden. I don't know. She was just a thrill in the film.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think just the focus on her eyes, that's another one of those montage clips that you see all the time, which is like just the camera, the way she throws herself at his mouth in extreme close-up is, I think it's a fascinating choice. And the act of obscuring most of her face just lets us focus on a really compelling physical attribute of Elizabeth Taylor, which is her closed eyes. They are just dreamy. Just get lost in them. Oof. Dreamy. She's pretty great. Are you a real Taylor head? Do you celebrate the whole catalog? Have you seen Quo Vadis as many times as you've seen Giant, for example?
You know, I've not seen that one, but it's one that I've actually always been curious about. I love watching her on screen. Any chance that I have, I think it's great to just see her because she is so interesting and she delivers such interesting performances, whether it's things like this or Cleopatra, which is, certainly a big one, and into something like Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf. Like, I find her to be just a constant thrill to watch in whatever it is that I've seen of hers.
Yeah. It's funny to see just where she went sort of toward the graying years of her career. Like I had forgotten that she was on things like Can't Hurry Love and High Society and Murphy Brown and The Nanny. I mean, was she on those shows? Did she actually show up? Or was it a clip show? Like, I don't remember, but it feels like Murphy Brown would have been something that she might have shown up for. Just a really interesting choice for somebody like Elizabeth Taylor, who in my head never would have done that.
Well, I mean, her last feature film performance was in the Flintstones.
Yeah.
So, it happens. Sadly.
Yeah, I guess that's a good point.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. What have we talked about? Have we talked about anything of hers on this show? This might be the first. No, Giant. We did talk about Giant, which is the only other film of hers that we've had a chance to chat about.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Really interesting.
Somebody who we definitely need to look at more because I think that she just brings a lot of energy to her performances, even when it's not as big a performance. Like, I think between the three performances, it's certainly Montgomery Clift and Shelley Winters who have the bigger performances, but even like her relationship with him, especially as we get to the end and his life starts spiraling out of control, I still found that she was delivering a lot with her confusion in the relationship and that final conversation when she comes to the prison to visit him. I mean, it was just beautiful.
Well, Taylor's wonderful. Really enjoyed seeing her in this. It's not the hugest of huge parts, but man, does she make for a perfect foil for this three-way romance.
And I guess the dress that she was wearing I can't remember if it was one of the many soirees that they're at. In fact, I think it's the soiree when she first meets him. She's wearing that white gown with all of the white flowers all over the front. And I guess that design that Edith Head came up with was so popular because of this film. Like, through that whole next decade, that was a major dress design for proms and other dances and weddings, all sorts of stuff. It was a huge influence in the world of fashion.
But do you know her nicknames?
Edith Head?
No, Elizabeth Taylor. Subject of the dress.
No.
Okay, I'll tell you. You could call her Liz. You could call her La Liz. But if you were really friendly, you could call her Kitten.
Oh.
Which is so weird because that's what I call you all the time. Okay.
That's right.
Who else you got?
We have to talk about the cinematography. It was William C. Mellor, who was the cinematographer of this film. What have we talked about of his? Anything? Compulsion, actually, a few years later. Giant. And so there have been a few films of his that we've talked about. What did you think of the cinematography here? We've alluded to it quite a bit.
I think it's great because, just the way he dances with light and shadow to really tell the story of this guy's weird demeanor from any given scene. It's another one of those where, like, looking at how light affects his phone calls, affects him in, like, their sex scene is, as you mentioned, it's so dark with the outline of the radio in the window. Like, he plays with light in such a really interesting way to drive the story forward with the beams and bars of light crossing faces, the chiaroscuro lighting, which is, I think, one of those really interesting techniques to contrasting light and dark, to also be doing it to build that dramatic tension on screen. I think it's really lovely. And and for most of the sequences, particularly when he's meeting Elizabeth Taylor, like, it's very, very bright. They're all like party scenes, and it's only when when he's being ignored, it's very bright. Like, in the most obvious sequence where they are in the scene together, the thing is incredibly well lit and he's invisible. It's only when he becomes dark and mysterious that they actually, in the pool hall, that they actually begin, pool room, that they actually begin having their relationship. I think that's really interesting. What is compelling about that character, and how is it demonstrated with light?
Really quite beautiful. And I mean, one scene that stands out to me, I already mentioned the oneer when he's on the phone, just the way that was constructed and shot, but also, like, everything going on that climactic lake sequence when he takes Alice out on the boat, and it's just it just gets darker and darker and darker, and you just have this lit up boat out in the middle of just black water. It worked so well in context of the mood and the tone that they were trying to create with everything here. And I was really, I don't know, it was exciting cinematography. It's interesting that this would go on to beat something like Death of a Salesman, which was really using cinematography to its advantage throughout, but also in kind of a subjective way as we kind of go into the character's head. And I suppose you could say that is true here, but it's interesting that this one, I think, is a little less overt than that film, and then this is the one that would go on winning.
Less overt, but I'm pushing some of the tonal differences. Like, it feels, there are parts when we get into the legal bit and they're chasing through the woods and we are introduced to the police investigators it's just downright noir. And I think that swing of tonality for the film, like using light and camera to define the changes in the overall tone of the film, I think is just expert. Like, it's beautiful. And we talked about how so much of Death of a Salesman, even in using the camera the way they did, still felt so much like a set, like we were filming a play and pieces were moving around in a giant soundstage. This movie is not that at all.
And then I think paired with the editing, William Hornbeck was the editor. Mm-hmm. The way that maybe not the editing so much, but specifically the way that George Stevens chose to get from scene to scene and sequence to sequence with dissolves. Like, there were so many dissolves in this film, and some of them were fairly lengthy, to the point where there was a shot, this was right in the boat after I think that he has just stopped the boat with Angela. They were just talking, and she was talking about, I have such different feelings about it ever since the drownings last summer. And she leaves that with him, and then she kind of disappears. You have him sitting in the boat. You can clearly tell that he's starting to formulate things in his head. And then we get this really slow dissolve back to Alice. And I can't remember what specifically she was doing, but the water is so dark, and it's a great dissolve because Alice is just kind of hovering over the water over the course of this dissolve, with him still sitting in the boat before we kind of finish the dissolve. And that happened a number of times with dissolves that just made them very effective and really put you in a place of being in George's head right up to the end, where as he's walking to his execution, we have a dissolve of, again, that kiss, that beautiful kiss between George and Angela, before it comes back and we just see him walking through to death row.
Both dramatic and super practical, right? Like that first dissolve from their first kiss dissolves into, like, later in their relationship in a way that's just, like, perfectly matched to demonstrate time passing. Like, what a great way to demonstrate time is get lost in a kiss. I think it's just really lovely.
So this film was highly acclaimed when it came out, but over time people started saying that it felt really exaggerated. It was slowly paced. The social commentary, it felt dated. I read that, and then I saw the film, and I'm like, well, I didn't really think so. Like, I felt this was really quite strong. I mean, does that strike you at all? Can you see how it can be read that way through today's eyes?
No, I think I'm with you. I don't get it. I was in it, man. I was like on rails from the first shot. I was really provoked by what's happening next.
Yeah, me too. Very interesting that, because I mean, I was even looking at some reviews just over on Letterboxd, and some people were like, God, what a bore. And I don't know. I guess maybe there's just a mentality that goes along with watching some older films. But I mean, I found this just to be a thrill, and I was invested in all three of these characters. I found it to be just exhilarating.
I think it could be just that some people don't like old movies.
Yeah, there could be that.
Everything. Once you I think it's easy to put up modern cultural barriers around yourself, and when those run into conflict with a piece of art, it's pretty easy to say that art is bad because it doesn't hold up. But the art wasn't made with your cultural barriers in mind. I have them too. I get it.
But it is interesting because, like, I feel if you're invested in these characters, I just don't feel it lulls at all. I feel it's a very engaging film. So, who knows?
That was certainly my experience.
This was a film affected by the production code at the time. Alice, of course, wants to get an abortion, but they had problems with the line in the script when she comes to visit the doctor and says, "Doctor, you've got to help me." And they forced them to change the line. So she said, "Somebody's got to help me." And that is how that is delivered. But it's such a strange, the production code, I tell you, because it's so clear to me that it is all about abortion. And so it's so weird that they're even allowing the story to be told at all, because it's like, clearly they want an abortion. Like, how could you read that any other way?
Yeah. And she's sitting with, objectively, the guy's a doctor. Like, I don't know how to mistake that. I don't know how to mistake it. It's just such it's one of those above the line, like, check this box. You cannot say in real words that a doctor is being asked for this service.
What it actually did, and I thought it was fairly interesting, is it made for a very interesting play between her and the doctor, because it ended up feeling like a woman who is asking for an abortion in a very roundabout way because she didn't know how the doctor would respond. And so she's making up this whole story and she's telling all of these lies. And then, of course, he's just like, "Oh, you'll be fine. You'll figure it out." And then she comes out and tells the real story, and he still is like, "I can't help you." But it ended up, I don't know. I felt if that was the answer that Stevens and his writers came to in order to get around the production code, I felt like they made an exceptional scene out of it.
Yeah, it was much better because it gave her a lot more to work with, Shelley Winters, right? To be able to be more deliberate in the complexity of her request. I think it was perfect. And he becomes so much more of a jerk after the truth is out, right? You expect some sort of, I don't know, I guess a little sympathy to, once the truth is out, but he is just, it's so of a time that he became worse, like culturally subservient to the norms of the time, and cold, really cold at the end of that scene. It was a great scene.
Yeah, I just think that he's playing into the darkness so well in scenes like that.
Mm-hmm.
My last little note was, did you know, I know how much you love David Mamet. David Mamet says this is one of 4 perfect films.
Mamet said that.
Yeah, this is in his book, Bambi vs. Godzilla, on the nature, purpose, and practice of the movie business. This, The Godfather, no surprise there. Galaxy Quest, that only surprises me coming from David Mamet. Like,
from David
it's
Mamet.
A fantastic film.
He's not wrong.
He's not, but still. Last, Dodsworth, the 1936 film.
That's the one I haven't seen, Dodsworth.
It's a good film. It is definitely a good film. I watched it somewhat recently, and now I feel like I need to go back and revisit it because I'm like, gosh, I wasn't thinking it in those terms, but now I need to check it again to see, what I think of it. So anyway.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, I love it. I think it's great.
I loved it. Fantastic. Glad we had a chance to chat about it. So we'll be right back. But first, our credits.
The Next Reel is a production of True Story FM, engineering by Andy Nelson, music by Ian Post, Oriole Novella, and Eli Catlin. Andy usually finds all the stats for the awards and numbers at the-numbers.com, boxofficemojo.com, imdb.com, and wikipedia.org. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, please consider doing that for our show. Andy, can you believe we've almost hit 700 episodes of The Next Reel?
I know, it's crazy. And with all the other episodes in our family of podcasts, we are well over 1,200 episodes of movie conversation. It's really pretty amazing that we've gotten to have these in-depth movie chats every week for over a decade now.
And we couldn't have done it without our loyal community of film fans. Their support over the years has meant so much.
For sure. That reminds me, we should give the merch store a shout out. Buying shirts from thenextreel.com/merch is a great way listeners can continue to support the show. Plus, they get to sport our great designs.
Absolutely. I think sometimes folks forget we have a variety of shirts, mugs, phone cases, and more available. In fact, a great place to start is with a shirt sporting the Next Reel's logo.
We also have that classic Fast Times Spicoli Surf School tee, or the weirdly popular Rusty's European Tour shirt.
The one from National Lampoon's European Vacation. Why is that so popular?
Search me, but we have sold a ridiculous number of those. I guess there are a lot of Rustys taking trips to Europe?
We're always adding new designs based on movies we've covered, like our brand new design for a streetcar named Desire, featuring a streetcar named Desire. So if you want to rep your love of TNR and films, head to thenextreel.com/merch.
Every purchase helps us continue to have these weekly in-depth conversations. So visit thenextreel.com/merch today.
And as always, thanks for listening and being a part of the Next Reel community. We've got lots more great movie chats coming your way. All right. Sequels and remakes, Andy. How many times? Is there a sequel to this? Do we get to see him in the chair? How does that work?
It's a very short sequel.
Very short sequel.
Yeah. No sequels, but certainly, and no remakes of this particular film, but certainly there have been other adaptations of the source material, An American Tragedy. There had been a stage adaptation in 1926, and in fact, this film is partially based on that stage adaptation. You'll see in the credits. Sternberg's 1931 version that I already mentioned, and apparently the author was very unhappy with that version. There was more stage versions. There was radio shows. There was a TV version made in Brazil. There was an opera. Some people say that Woody Allen pulled a lot from this story for his film Match Point, which I guess I can see to a certain extent. A lot of people say that there have been a lot of references in other books and TV shows and things like that, but there have not been any other overt actual adaptations of the book other than kind of those ones I was just mentioning.
I'm kind of surprised this movie doesn't have more of a remake appeal. Like what's the one that we did the whole series on, the Star is Born.
Yeah.
It surprises me. I think this movie should be fodder for that kind of. I'd be interested to see how this ages over generations.
Well, I certainly am curious about the book now, just to see like how different this was. I mean, it sounds fairly similar, honestly, this version to that version. Yeah, I don't know. I'd be curious to learn more, and I wonder if it's just because of the actual true crime element of it that is keeping people from it, or I don't know. I'm curious why it hasn't drawn more people to it.
How did it do at award season?
It did really well for itself. This film ended up with 15 wins and 10 other nominations. At the Oscars, it was second behind Streetcar Named Desire as far as the number of nominations. It had 9 nominations, winning 6. Nominated for Best Picture, but lost to An American in Paris. Montgomery Clift was nominated for Best Actor, but lost to Humphrey Bogart in The African Queen. We talked about that in our Death of a Salesman episode. Shelley Winters was nominated for Best Actress in a Leading Role, but lost to Vivien Leigh in A Streetcar Named Desire. George Stevens won Best Director. The script won Best Adapted Screenplay. It won. This is the winner for the category the series is about, Best Cinematography, Black and White. Edith Head won Best Costume Design, Black and White. It won Best Editing, and it won Best Music, Scoring of Dramatic or Comedy Picture. At Cannes, it was nominated for the Grand Prix, but lost to Miracle in Milan and Miss Julie. At the DGA, George Stevens won the Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Motion Pictures Award. And the Golden Globes, we haven't really brought the Golden Globes up lately because they're the Golden Globes and they've kind of fallen out of favor. But it was interesting because this was the first year, I think it was the 9th Golden Globes, but it was the first year they actually split the category of Best Picture into Best Motion Picture Drama and Best Motion Picture Comedy or Musical. And this won Best Motion Picture Drama, whereas An American in Paris ended up getting the comedy or musical. Shelley Winters was nominated for Best Actress in a Drama, but lost to Jane Wyman in The Blue Veil. It was nominated for Best Cinematography, Black and White, but lost to Death of a Salesman here. Same thing, Best Director. George Stevens lost to Laszlo Benedict for Death of a Salesman.
Interesting.
I mean, they're both incredibly strong films, so it's nice to see Death of a Salesman getting some recognition, even if it is the Golden Globes.
Yeah, even if it's the Golden Globes. How the mighty have fallen. Did they ever? It was a shortfall. Okay. How to do at the box office.
Hey, we finally got one for the series with some actual data. Stevens had a very specific budget of $2,295,304 to make this, which equates to about $26.8 million. I don't know why sometimes numbers are this way, but equates to about $26.8 million in today's dollars. The movie premiered at Cannes earlier in 1951, then opened domestically August 14th, 1951. This did well for itself and ended up being number 9 in the top 10 highest grossing films of the year, just above Father's Little Dividend, also with Elizabeth Taylor. All told, it went on to earn $3.5 million domestically, or $40.8 million in today's dollars. That lands it with an adjusted profit per finished minute of $115,000.
Man, that APFM just keeps giving.
Yes, it does.
What a fan! Has the industry picked that up yet? I can't remember. I haven't seen any headlines. Well, this was a great movie. I'm really, really glad that we got to talk about it in this series, and I can see how it won. I can see how it won.
I can too. I'm looking forward to our next 2 just as comparison and getting a sense of those 2. But so far, it's interesting. Like thinking about the Frogmen again, I'm like, in today's world, I feel like the Frogmen probably would have just gotten a technical achievement award for what it was doing and not ended up getting a nomination. But we'll talk about that in a later episode. Regardless, I had a fantastic time with this film. Definitely something I would love to see again. I'd love to see this on the big screen. I just can only imagine how beautiful the black and white is up there. But really thrilling film to step into without knowing anything about it.
I think so too.
All right, well, we'll be right back for our ratings, but first, here's the trailer for next week's movie, Alfred Hitchcock's Strangers on a Train.
2 fellows meet, like you and I. No connection between them whatsoever. Each one has somebody that he'd like to get rid of. So, they swap murders.
Fantastic, isn't it? You didn't know when Bruno proposed this pact that he was serious. Dead serious. You had made the mistake of speaking to a stranger on a train. And now, wherever you go, whatever you do, you find yourself dominated by his evil presence. And you, Bruno, to you, killing was the answer. Murder without clue, without motive. The perfect crime. Too perfect. And Anne, life looked very attractive to you. Until the love in your heart became gripped by a terror that drew you deeper and deeper into this vortex of conspiracy.
Holocaust. I have a murder on my conscience, but it's not my murder, Mr. Haynes.
I wonder if you know how much I love you.
Brazen woman, I'm the one to say that.
Haynes, hold it!
It is hard to believe we've been having in-depth weekly conversations about movies since 2011.
You're telling me producing this show week after week is so much fun, but it does require a lot of work behind the scenes. If you'd like to help support our efforts, one easy way is by using our Originals page when shopping for books and movies that we've covered.
Your purchases made through our links give us a small commission at no extra cost to you and allow us to keep having these great discussions.
The Originals page at thenextreel.com/originals links to the source material for all of our adapted film discussions. Purchasing through our links supports the show.
In Season 13, we explore various awards categories and the films nominated in them.
We wrapped up our 1940 Best Picture series with adaptations of Mice and Men from John Steinbeck and Wuthering Heights from Emily Bronte's novel, not to mention the play Dark Victory by George Brewer Jr. and Bertram Bloch.
The 1947 Academy Award adapted screenplay series featured Anna and the King of Siam, based on Margaret Langdon's book, plus The Best Years of Our Lives, Brief Encounter, and The Killers.
The 1952 cinematography nominees included Death of a Salesman and A Streetcar Named Desire, A Place in the Sun, based on both a play and a book, and Strangers on a Train, based on Patricia Highsmith's first novel.
So many great movies based on books and plays, like Beckett, The Pumpkin Eater,
A Boy and His Dog, Rollerball,
The Princess Bride, Congo, The Scarlet Letter,
Jackie Brown, The Deep End, The Gray, The Woman in Black,
and Top Gun Maverick, which I'm very much looking forward to revisiting.
Get the source books at thenextreel.com/originals. Start
your next read or reread from the movies we've covered. Visit thenextreel.com/originals today. All right, Andy, it's time to talk about Letterboxd. Letterboxd is, when you think of robbing stars from future movies, what films are you going to take them from in order to give this 5 stars?
I don't know if I'm giving this 5 stars. I really did love it, though. I feel like I'm good putting this at 4.5 for now. And it might go up, it might go down in later watches, but 4.5 with a heart is where I sit at the moment.
Yeah, I struggle with that because I didn't have any complaints. You know what I mean? Like, I have no complaints about this movie. So I love the look of it. I love the feel of it. I like all the performances I thought were great. And so I think I'm going to give it 5. We'll see. You know,
that.
I don't know. Maybe it gets worse on future viewings. Curse of recency. But I think I will. I think I'll give it a straight up 5 and a heart.
Fantastic. Well, I love that. That lands this film over in our Letterboxd page, letterboxd.com/thenextreel at 4 3/4. So we'll round that up to 5 stars and a heart. That's where this one is going to sit. So what did you think about A Place in the Sun? We would love to hear your thoughts. Hop into the Show Talk channel over in our Discord community, where we will be talking about the movie this week.
When the movie ends,
our conversation begins.
Letterboxd, give it to Andrew.
As Letterboxd always do it.
Okay, I'm going to go first because I have a question.
Oh, okay.
This is a 1 star from Jordan Collins. And the 1 star says, I'm really happy this one was removed when they did that AFI Top 100 again. So this was, for a while, I think it was like 92 on the AFI Top Films list. And this is a thing that we sometimes do, and there are posters of the AFI list. Like, have you seen all the movies on the AFI list? And Citizen Kane is number one. And oh my gosh, we've talked about a lot of movies that are on the list on this very show. This used to be on there, and now I think it's like what I was looking for. I'm trying to find what is the actual number on the AFI list outside of the top 100. I think I saw 155 or something. So I don't know what that means, but my question for you is that do you ever think about when you see the AFI list, does it mean anything to you?
I generally don't think much of the AFI's lists. I mean, they have so many of those stinking lists. 100 years, 100 movies, 100 stars, 100 laughs, 100 thrills, 100 passions, 100 heroes and villains, 100 songs. They've done so many of those over time that I think that they're fun to kind of look at, but I generally don't take them as anything that's too serious in the scope of lists of greats. I think they're good starting places just to get a sense as to like what's out there. And hey, if you're going to do a watch through just to kind of watch a bunch of great films, sure, it's a good place to start. You're going to be checking a lot of great films off your list, but I think there are also other strong places to find what I would argue are probably stronger lists.
Yeah, okay. That's interesting. Right. So I did find it was 92 on the original list. I think the 100 years, I don't know. I like the 100 years, 100 movies, and I thought about it when my kids were born. 20 years ago, I was thinking about the list in terms of, or I was thinking about AFI and these kinds of lists because it was a great way to get my kids to see a lot of old movies because we had a task list. I'm not sure that necessarily matters all that much, but it does surprise me a little bit that this fell off the list and that someone was so astute as to say their critique was 1 star. I'm really glad this isn't on AFI's top 100. It provoked me to go look it up. So that's all I have to say. It's just interesting to me. The AFI
but I think it also speaks to that particular Letterboxd reviewer that they put so much stake into AFI's top 100 lists.
Yeah. I don't think about it every day, AFI.
Yeah,
I don't think about it every day. So anyway, what do you got?
All right. Well, I've got a 3.5 star review by Kayla, who has this to say: men are literally terrifying, WTF.
Oh, sweet.
Which I just think is so funny.
Thanks, Letterboxd. Or should we say thanks, Canadian Consortium of Business Owners who just put a bunch of money in Letterboxd and kept our dear friends and founders on the list. Thanks to you guys, too.